Today I'll be talking about how to start and stay on track for delivering EA value. So to do this, I'll be discussing first, how do you deliver value? And then talk about how to lead a productive stakeholder meeting and how to disseminate information among your enterprise. Then we'll go through an example of how you can take just a little bit of data and show value from it with some quick wins. Now, being successful as an enterprise architect is tied very closely to your ability to show value to stakeholders. Now, the value that we show to stakeholders isn't just about saying, here, this is what enterprise architecture can show, but it's also about having that information leveraged by the organization. A 2016 study of enterprise architecture management success factors found that EAM organizational anchoring is core to EA success. And EAM organizational anchoring is defined as the characteristics and conditions through which EAM is embedded in the organization to enable, drive, and influence an organization's performance. So we're talking about showing value in terms of having the insights of enterprise architecture exposed and leveraged by the rest of the enterprise. So I'm going to go through a little bit of terminology that I'll be using throughout the presentation today. So I will be discussing stakeholders quite a bit, and by stakeholders, I mean anyone with an interest in the insights from enterprise architecture. And this can be anyone from high-level decision makers to operational implementers. I'll also be talking about key stakeholders, and key stakeholders may represent a group of stakeholders. So they might be a manager of a group that will be using those EA insights, or they could be representing a particular use case interest. We also have sponsors, and these are generally tied in more closely to the enterprise architecture team and may ascertain the success of the EA initiative. We're also going to be talking about outputs, and so these are outputs from enterprise architecture, so anything stakeholders use to consume information and insights from EA. A particular type of output that I'll be discussing is dashboard, which contains a collection of interactive views that stakeholders may access. So it's a form of self-service output that can also be presented more formally, as we'll see. So let's talk about how you deliver value. First, you have to know your stakeholders. So you have to understand who your audience will be, who will be consuming the outputs that you produce, what insights do they need, what questions are they looking to answer. And so knowing your stakeholders is one of the main ways that you can actually provide valuable insight. And so to know your stakeholders, you need to ask a few questions. First, ask what insights does this group, and it's best to sort of go group by group of stakeholders, but what insights does this group need from enterprise architecture? Now, keep in mind, they probably won't be able to provide this to you couched in enterprise architecture language, but they'll provide that to you in terms that they are familiar with. Now, some examples of these insights could be IT operations needs up-to-date application deployment information, or procurement needs applications mapped to functions. Other examples might be end user IT needs role to application mappings, or new hires everywhere need easy access to process models. Next, you need to ask who can provide more detail about these needs. It's probably unrealistic to involve everyone from IT operations or all new hires. So you want to talk about who will determine the success of the initiative and who will be leading these groups towards use of the EA outputs. These questions will help you determine who can be serving as a key stakeholder, who will help to determine what will be useful for that group, what is a successful provision of an insight, and Also someone who will be able to push that group of stakeholders towards actually using those outputs. It's not always automatic that if we are providing information, someone will consume it. So we want to typically involve someone in that sort of managerial role who can encourage those stakeholders to consume the outputs from enterprise architecture. Next, you have to prioritize these goals or concerns. So seek out situations where there is alignment between the insights needed from different groups. Now, this might mean that they are asking different questions, but it uses some of the same data or analysis to answer those questions, so you can resolve both with one effort. You also want to seek out situations where your sponsor's goals align with stakeholder needs. Once you've prioritized your list of goals, now you can have some steady focus. So it's best to work towards a use case to benefit a group of stakeholders. So you have your audience in mind, you have your focus, you can steadily make progress on that with that value provision in mind as your end goal. I'd also recommend starting with no more than 3 main use cases. Any more than that, it's easy to get overwhelmed or distracted by jumping between different use cases. And these things will help you remember what is key, which is no modeling for modeling's sake. So modeling for modeling's sake should always be avoided. We always want to make sure that the effort that we're putting in as part of enterprise architecture is not to just check a box of doing EA, but rather focused on providing value to the group of stakeholders that we want to provide value to. Now, we also need to make sure we are involving our stakeholders and different subgroups of those stakeholders at the right time. So the right involvement at the right time looks like this, where we start out discussing needs. And that might be starting out with sort of a medium-sized group where we can have those representative voices discussing what insights are needed and providing some feedback for that. Now, that allows you as the enterprise architect to take that information about needs and that understanding that you've gained of your stakeholders, prioritize that into goals, and then come back and present those goals so that you're giving a vision, a pathway for how this initiative is going to proceed. Presenting goals is an opportunity for those stakeholders to then provide feedback to you about the prioritization or the methods. And it's key to incorporate that feedback. Now, that's not the only feedback that you'll need from your stakeholders. You want to make sure that you are regularly incorporating feedback, which requires you to be demonstrating progress along the way. Now, demonstrating progress, again, this can happen with different groups of different sizes. We'll talk about that a bit more in the next session. Lastly, it's key to publicize outputs. And this step really should not be glossed over. It's critical to get that information out there, make sure that stakeholders are aware that it's there, and that they know how to access it. So now let's talk about how to conduct productive stakeholder meetings. There are 4 aspects of this: prepare, present, discuss, and iterate. So first, prepare. One aspect of preparation is who you invite. So you want to make sure you're inviting with intent, inviting people who will be able to participate in a productive discussion, and inviting the right number of people for what you want to show and discuss at that time. So this might be something that is a simple one-on-one with a particular key stakeholder, or perhaps your sponsoring stakeholder. Or it may be a focus group that's going to be more discussion oriented. It also could be a broad group where you want to do more of kind of presentation of outputs or of progress. Another aspect of preparation is informing participants. Send out an agenda so that the participants know what is expected of them and what to expect in that meeting. You may also want to consider sending along materials such as the goals or descriptions of the use cases or your vision for enterprise architecture. And materials may also include some of the outputs that you've produced so far, such as access to a dashboard or a report produced by the tool that you're using. Next is present. So you always want to have some level of presentation, regardless of where you are in the process. Now, what that presentation will look like will vary depending on the size of the meeting, as well as where you are in the process of your enterprise architecture initiative. But when you present, you should always provide an overview. So you want to provide an overview that gives your audience an overview of why you're doing enterprise architecture, what enterprise architecture is, and broadly what methods are being used, as well as what goals you're working to achieve. So providing that overview will ground the audience in the meeting and help them to know where they are coming in. You also should specify methods and intended outcomes of goals, so that you're talking about what process is being used and what you're working towards. It's also key to show works in progress. So as you're working through these initiatives, you're going to have many stages where something is partly done, but maybe not fully complete, or perhaps a subsection is done, but it isn't all ready. And it's very important to present these works in progress in your stakeholder meetings. One, it shows the progress that you have made already. But two, this allows for organic feedback from the stakeholders. So these draft outputs, even in the early stages, they give the stakeholders something to react to, as does specifying methods and goals and the overview. So you want to make sure that in these stakeholder meetings, you're presenting enough for the stakeholders to react to, even if in the early stages, what you're presenting is just a very simple outline of goals or even an overview of the tool that you're using. Showing what you have so far and discussing vision gives stakeholders a place for them to step in and tell you their thoughts and their reaction to it. And that's what will happen in the discussion piece of this. So when you discuss as part of stakeholder meetings, that gives you an opportunity to hear their feedback, such as what information was useful, what formats are helpful, what was confusing, and understand needs. This discussion portion, this is really where you can learn what a stakeholder need is. This is also an opportunity for you to get commitment from your stakeholders, particularly if you are talking to people who are managing others. This is a time for you to say, if they are asking for an output from you, for data, for analysis, you can ask them for commitment from themselves or from their team members to provide data to you. And this is especially the case when you can ask them or their team to provide information in an easy access format, such as entering data into a tabular format in a dashboard. Lastly, it's important to iterate. So just a single stakeholder meeting won't be enough to set you on the right path. It's important to set up a regular meeting schedule so that you can provide updates and show progress and incorporate regular feedback. When you have a regular iterative approach, it's also easier to show works in progress and not wait for perfection because you're regularly meeting with them. So you can see that those points along the way are points towards achieving that vision that you've laid out. Next, let's discuss publicizing outputs and reporting. So again, the aspect of publicizing outputs and reporting is key to showing value to stakeholders. Just because you've produced amazing outputs doesn't always mean that they're going to be consumed by your enterprise. So we want to make sure that we are following through on the step of disseminating that information. Now, one way to do that is through data-fueled presentations. So here, I'm not talking about the types of presentations that we give to stakeholders to show our progress in enterprise architecture. Instead, I'm talking about users across the enterprise using outputs such as dashboards in their everyday presentations. So they and their audience will save time and get more accurate information because they'll be avoiding the work of putting together a static presentation, and their audience will have the advantage of being able to have a question answered immediately through drill downs into the data. So an example of a data field presentation look like this. For example, someone may be presenting about moving from an on-premise ERP system to the cloud. And so you can see this cloud transformation comparison is laid out in this dashboard where we're looking at a comparison of availability and complexity and response time, as well as cost, even looking at a comparison of what the deployment actually looks like in both scenarios. And so instead of having to lay this out in a static view, the presenter would be able to go right to a page that has this information, and this information would be updated based off of new knowledge. So this dashboard is one example of a data field presentation. Another example is here. This is focused on technologies. And a presenter can focus on technology life cycles and find the applications that are associated with those technologies, so the applications that are also affected by that life cycle, to discuss the budgeting, security, and other ramifications. So again, you can see how a live dashboard like this can be used in a presentation to drill down and focus in on a particular subset. Everyday access is also key to disseminate and publicize information about the enterprise architecture. While enterprise architecture outputs should be always made easily accessible, sometimes it can be hard to get users to go to another page, even if that's just simply a site that they can access. You can make it easier by incorporating those outputs into tools that they use every day. So in this example, an ABACUS enterprise dashboard is embedded into Microsoft Teams. So it's just a tab in a Teams channel, and users who are already accustomed to going to Teams every day for the basic needs of their job can open up this tab and view the information directly in Teams. The same thing can be done in Confluence with embedding enterprise dashboards or ABACUS enterprise browser views directly into iframes in Confluence pages. Again, facilitating that everyday easy access. So now I'll talk about some quick wins that you can have with enterprise architecture. So a quick win where if we start out just with a little bit of data, what can we do with it? So for this example, I will be talking through having just a little bit of data to start out and using that in ABACUS as an example to discuss what views could be created from that and the way that we present that to stakeholders. And this is to give a sense of how you can have those quick wins, you can show that value, and have something to present to your stakeholders even early in the process to continue that approach of getting feedback, iterating, and improving what you present to your stakeholders. So in this example, I'll say that we have data on capabilities and applications and properties or attributes of each, as well as relationships between capabilities and applications. So right away, we would be using catalogs to work with this. Now, catalogs allow for very easy import of data, particularly if that data is found in an Excel file. And so a catalog would be used right away to import this information. Now, catalogs can also be more sophisticated than that. Here we have another example of a catalog, this time looking at application data. And this is a catalog as shown in an ABACUS enterprise view with heat maps incorporated directly into the catalog. We can have matrices as well. This is a simple way for us to have all of the connections between applications and capabilities shown in a single view. Now, so far, we've just gone through in our example, importing that data and then simply having that data that is there shown in a couple of views. So this doesn't really require much additional configuration, just opening a matrix, opening that catalog, and applying a heat map if desired. Now we can also draw in diagrams. So in this example, this list of capabilities has already been added, as you recall, by importing from Excel using a catalog. And so here we have these capabilities already listed. You can see them in the Explorer tree. And that's because in ABACUS, any data that's added is part of the repository. So it doesn't just live in a catalog. It actually lives as a part of the repository in the tree and can be viewed in other formats, such as a diagram like we see here. So in this GIF that's playing here, the capabilities are being pulled onto this diagram in a couple of quick clicks and are being rearranged to be a capability map. Now, this can then be extended on, so we can create a heat map leveraging this view. Now, in ABACUS, heat maps can be created using any property. So this can include custom properties that are very easily created within the user interface, and which can include aspects such as list properties or date fields. And heat maps can also include calculated fields, as we see here with the complexity calculator. So the complexity calculator counts up the connected components. In this case, the number of applications supporting these capabilities, and then we have that heat map applied accordingly. We can also automate diagram creation. So in this example, we'd be able to create a simple template. We're looking at capabilities and applications, update an easy to use extension, and run that to create a vertical slice for each capability. So now we have details about each capability easily available. So a stakeholder interested in having that vertical slice information can follow through on that for any of the capabilities available. From there, we can add links. So the heat mapped capabilities allow us to understand which capability has the most supporting applications. And then a link will allow a user to follow that link and see what those applications are that support that capability. Visual algorithms allow us to do additional analysis. Here we have a visual algorithm that is built out using simple building blocks. So this is a no-code visual algorithm. And here we're actually taking the business fit of the application and attributing it to the capabilities that it supports. And this is using an average, since there can be multiple applications associated with a single capability. Now, what we've done so far will allow us to then put this information into a dashboard. And so here you can see several out-of-the-box portlets. These are very easily configurable with some simple widgets. And these allow us to have this information presented in a dynamic format where stakeholders can interact with this information and drill down on it. So here in the tree map, we have the hierarchy of capabilities and our connected applications below that. We also have portlets showing properties. One of them is a custom property from the import, and the other is a property attributed from the application. We're also showing the diagram here, and as you can see, the diagram is being interactive with the other views as well. So this gets filtered as we filter through the portlets, and those links also persist here on a dashboard. Now, this would be a dashboard that we could provide to stakeholders, sending this along with its unique URL, or incorporate into a Confluence page or enterprise or other enterprise views, such as in a Teams channel, so that it's easy for those stakeholders to access it or to use it in a presentation. And from here, they can gain insight about the linkages between capabilities and applications and achieve an understanding from that. So some closing thoughts. It's important to know your stakeholders and set priorities. And so this is really this first step in enterprise architecture, to know what your stakeholders need, what their needed insights are, and set priorities around that. Next, hold productive meetings by preparing, presenting, discussing, and iterating. You want to make sure that you're talking to the right audience, giving them something to react to, and having a discussion that goes both ways. You also want to make sure that's iterative and be sure to show works in progress. Anchor EA with data-fueled presentations and everyday access. So this really goes back to the idea where value is shown when we are anchoring within the enterprise. And anchoring happens by having the insights from enterprise architecture accessible and incorporated, so that they can provide the basis for everyday decisions and help people as they do their jobs in the enterprise. Also, keep in mind the ways that you can draw insight out of data with analysis and navigable dashboards. So you can start out with a very simple set, but you can go through that simple set, analyze it with no-code algorithms and out-of-the-box simulators, and build navigable dashboards to make it presentable for an audience and consumable for a wide range of users.